Dorian doesn't need an introduction, but he will be chatting about training. And at some point, he'll ask for some volunteers, so we're asking the VIP members to come on up, maybe line up like they did there earlier yesterday along the my left side. And as you ask questions, again, I remind you to use the mic so that everyone can hear and they can get to the video. And we'll let Dorian do his thing.
All right, thank you. All right, thanks everybody for turning up, and thanks to Ken for inviting me out here. I came to the Swiss first time 15 years ago and really enjoyed it, you know, because you got the sports, science, medicine side of it, so it's a little bit different from a usual seminar. You're going to get a chance to ask any questions, by the way, as we go along. The main topic that we're talking about, of course, is training and my training methods, which were somewhat different from the convention and still is. So I'll give you a bit of background on where this type of training came from. It was called Blood and Guts with my, I had a book called Blood and Guts and DVD called Blood and Guts. But really it's high intensity weight training. For the Mr. Olympia that I won, I pretty much set new standards as far as muscle mass combined with condition, and competing around 260. Previous to that, I think the heaviest bodybuilder on stage in shape was the previous Mr. Olympia, Lee Haney, about the same height as me, and is around about 240, 245. So it was quite a stride forward, and people are interested in my training and how I did that. The total amount of training I did for the Mr. Olympia to win those contests, weight training I'm talking about, was less than 4 hours a week, which is shocking to most people. So let me tell you where this type of training came from, where the roots are. I don't claim to have invented this type of training, but I did refine it somewhat for a competitive bodybuilder. So the background to this really is a guy called Arthur Jones. I don't know if anyone's heard of him, but Arthur Jones was pretty much a genius and a self-made multi-millionaire, had his own airline and airplane and all this stuff. So he wasn't really interested in trying to make money from bodybuilding. He was doing that elsewhere. He was just interested in what is it, you know, that creates muscle growth, that triggers the muscle growth, and what is the best and most effective way to train. And what he brought to everyone's attention was a few things that hadn't been brought up before. One of them was the role of genetics in ultimately, you know, how big and how strong and what kind of physique you can develop. Before that, people used to sell magazines based on, you know, if you do Arnold's chest routine, you can get Arnold's chest and all this kind of stuff. So he pointed out the role of genetics and, you know, skeletal structure and the length of muscle bellies ultimately determining how big those muscles can get. So that was one thing. And the other thing was the intensity of exercise. What is it that triggers the muscle growth? Is it the volume? Well, if it was the volume, then you'd have to constantly increase that factor. You know, doing 10 sets for chest, you'd have to do 15 and 20, and you know, ultimately you'd be in the gym all day. So obviously, that's not the key factor. The key factor is the intensity of the exercise, the momentary force and stress on the muscles, and not the volume. So you only need a very small amount of exercise to trigger that muscle growth. You need to push the exercise to the point where you can't do any more. So muscular failure, and occasionally beyond muscular failure. So you can do assisted force reps and even extra negative reps. So there's three phases of the movement in an exercise. Well, there's 2 or 3 depending on the exercise. You've got the positive, which is the lifting, which most people kind of concentrate on. So, for instance, if we're talking about a bench press, the positive is the pushing of the weight, or if we're doing rows, it's the pulling. And most people concentrate on that. Yeah, I've got that rep, and then kind of let it fall back down and do another one. But the negative part of the rep, or the lowering of the weight, is something that I've always emphasized. And that phase of the rep is the strongest part of the rep. So I believe you've got to kind of really concentrate on that and slow it down in order to tax it. Otherwise, you're going to finish the set and you may reach positive failure, but the negative part of the rep is going to be nowhere near failure. So on a bench press, we've got a positive, we've got a negative. Some exercises, we've got a peak contraction. That is the resistance in the contracted position. For an example, we could say pull down. A pull down is a resistance at the bottom. So the positive part of the rep is the weakest part of the rep. So in a pull down, we'll be coming down like this. Then the static is the next strongest part of the rep, and the negative is the strongest part. So I teach people to pull down without any momentum. You want to get the muscle moving the weight. And it's interesting listening to Bill Kazmaier, who, by the way, I respect a lot. And I remember Bill used to come to Birmingham in England, where I'm from. And there was a big gym there, a powerlifting gym called the Forum. There were a lot of strength trainers there and powerlifters. And Bill used to come there and stay for a month, 2 months at a time. And I happened to be training in the gym one day. And Bill was in there, and I was like, wow, that's Bill Kazmaier, strongest man in the world, from the TV and stuff. I think I was just like British champion at the time. And I was training in there doing chest. And Bill came over to me and he's like, shit, man, you were strong for a bodybuilder. Like, you're using heavy weights for a bodybuilder. I was like, really? I thought everybody did this. And he's like, no, man, you're kidding. Those guys back in the States are doing these little pussy weights and pumping up, and, you know? So I thought that was cool coming from Bill Kazmaier. And he's still talking about me doing 120-pound dumbbell flies in strict form, which I was doing at the time, and 4 or 5 on the incline or something like that. And, you know, I had never been to the States or seen anyone train from the States. I generally thought everybody trained like that. Anyway, so I got my information from a little bit from Arthur Jones and from Mike Menser. Probably some of you remember Mike Menser, who was a Mr. Universe and he competed in Olympia. And controversially didn't win in 1980 when Arnold made a comeback. Anyway, Mike Menser kind of popularized this kind of training. He called it heavy duty, and he did magazine articles and everything. So I took information from these 2 guys and kind of refined it down myself. I did log all my workouts, and I've actually still got I did a documentary kind of little thing last week, and we sat down and we got some of the old books out, which was interesting to me because I don't really get them out and look at them. I got every single workout that I did from 1984 to 1997. Every diet I did, everything I did, even the anabolics, which we were talking about yesterday, everything that I did that was relevant to what I was doing, I wrote it down so that I could analyze, I could look back and say, hey, this was working, this wasn't working, and kind of refine it. And I noticed myself, if I exceeded a certain amount of training, sets and reps, or time in the gym, volume if you like, or training frequency, I pretty much plateaued and got to a halt. So not only was it the theory that I was reading about, which made a lot of sense to me logically, it was the practical in the gym as well. This year I actually started my own certification, which is called DYHIT, and the people that I personally train are called master trainers, so they come to train with me. They do the practical in the gym, they do the theory, we have a study guide where they do the theory, and they do a theory exam at the end. And if they pass, then they become master trainers and they can go back to wherever they're from and they certify other people. So we actually got everything documented now, and we've got about 25, 26 trainers from 11 different countries now. So it's pretty cool. Got people all coming around the world to come and train with me and learn these methods so that they can teach them correctly. Because there's a lot of misconceptions about my training from the magazines. The first thing is, used to call it the Dorian Yates one-set training. Like, as if I just do one set per exercise. That's a bit misleading because I did pretty much refine it down so that I could do one set per exercise to failure. The last set where we go right to failure. And if you do that correctly, I don't believe there's a reason to do another set after that. But to get to that point, obviously you've got to warm up. You're going to go in the gym and start maxing out with 500 pounds on a squat or something without warming up. So you've got to warm up a little bit, but not unnecessarily. So to give you an instance, I'll just choose chest training as an example. I usually start with a low decline. Not a big fan of the flat bench press, although, it's the number one exercise everyone knows in the gym, and how much can you bench and all that stuff. And I did bench earlier on in my career. But one thing I learned from Arthur Jones was the muscle function and the range of motion and so on. The pecs is to bring the upper arm down and across the body. So bench press does that somewhat, but if you just tilt it to a slight decline, then your upper arm is coming down and across the chest more, and it takes the strain off this pec delt tendon area. If you know anyone that's had a pec tear, 99 times out of 100 it's on the flat bench press. So it carries a risk, and I don't think it's the best chest exercise out there unless you're particularly suited to it. So I usually start with a decline press. I would do one set fairly light, and as a guideline in my training manual, if you can figure out what you're going to max with, I don't mean max for one rep because that's useless for bodybuilding. It's even useless for powerlifting. It's only at a powerlifting meet you do one rep. 6 to 8 reps. Figure out what you're going to do for that, more or less, and then go 50% of that. So if you're doing 300 pounds on the bench, you want to be warming up with around 50%, so like 150, and then around 70%, whatever that is, 210, and then the last set, you're nice and warm, everything's firing, and then you can go to failure. So that would be 3 sets, and once you've done that set to real failure, I'm talking about controlling the negative, slowing it down, more explosive on the upward movement, and then you've got a spotter there to make sure you go to failure and just past failure, maybe 1 or 2 forced reps. You've got to be able to handle the weight yourself and do it correctly. And when we're talking about bodybuilding, again, listening to Bill yesterday, I was keeping in mind that it's totally different, bodybuilding and powerlifting or weightlifting. Weightlifting or powerlifting, your job is to get the weight from A to B. That's your job. So you arch your back, shorten the movement, have a wider grip, use momentum, whatever it takes to get the weight up. Whereas bodybuilding, you just have to think as that weight as a tool to put maximum stress on the muscles that you work in. In this case, will be the pecs. So that'll be the first exercise, 3 sets. Second exercise, probably move to a low incline, and the pecs, the delts, the triceps, all the muscles involved are now warmed up from the first exercise, very warm. So it's not necessary to run through the 3 sets. I just go to the second set, or 70%, or the medium set, if you like. Do a warm-up with that, and then go to the max set. Third exercise, probably a dumbbell movement. I like to do dumbbell flies. So again, changing the angle, changing the movement a little bit, so necessary to warm up. 1 set to warm up and 1 set to failure. So it pretty much sounds like nothing, right? 3 sets of bench, 2 sets of incline, 2 sets of flies. Write that down on a piece of paper. It doesn't look very impressive, but if you do it really properly, your pecs are going to be exhausted, and it's not necessary to do any more. So there's just an instance of a body part. I think we've got a brave lady somewhere who's volunteered to come and do some barbell curls. Mindy. So what we're going to do, I've chose barbell curls because they're fairly light exercise that we can do, and we can take it to the point of failure. So let's, Mindy, let's get a bar. We've got a straight bar, an easy bar. Easy bar there. So what do you think, Mindy, you would do on your max set for like 8 reps? Yeah, you look delicate. All right, let's try, let's put some 10s on there, 10s or 15s. Got some little weights somewhere? That's the big 10. All right. So you're going to curl up. I'm sure you've done this before. Control on the way down. Easy 1. Very impressive arms. 2. 3. 4. 5. 6. 7. Wait till the last set. She won't be smiling. 2 more. All right, put that down. Have a little rest. If anyone's got any questions, they can step up to the mic and get a question while we're like loading up. So, what do you think? 20s on there or 15s? Ah, we don't have little plates? That's so awkward. These are the ones I use a lot these days.
Here you go. I just have a question.
That's my last set. Yeah.
With the easy bar now, because the easy bar doesn't supinate the wrist fully.
Correct.
So wouldn't a straight bar be?
A straight bar, in theory, would be better because there's more supination.
Right.
The function of the biceps is to bend the arm and also to supinate the arm. So if you go like this and put your hand on the bicep and just turn like that, you'll see that the bicep contracts. So it's involved in the supination of the wrist. So when the wrist is pointing up, there's slightly more bicep involved. With the EZ bar, it's slightly less supinated, be a bit more brachialis. But having said that, most people find this bar more comfortable on the wrists. It's like forcing yourself on that straight bar. For me, I see you nodding away, so from India as well, it's less strain on the wrist. So maybe a slight compromise to be more comfortable and not injure your wrist. So we're going to do this set, Mindy. We're just going to do 8 reps because it's a warm-up set, hopefully anyway. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, excellent. 6, 7, 8. All right, cool. So that'd be like a medium set. We did a light set, we did a medium set, and now we've got to try and figure out what you're going to do for a set of 8. This is 15. You want to go 25? Oh, this looks heavy, but it's not, is it? Check weights.
I got it.
Is that going to be enough, or you want to put another 5 on?
25s. You've jumped 10 pounds or so.
You tell me.
No, we'll stay here.
Okay. All right. Take a little rest. Don't rush. So what we're going to do is you're going to keep the form. I'm going to spot you. So I might help you. When you're reaching failure, I'll help with 1 or 2 more. And then you're going to, on the last one, each rep I want you to emphasize the negative a little bit. So slower on the negative, a bit more forceful on the way up, but no swinging. It's important to try and eliminate the momentum. Yeah, if you're going to go like this at the start of every rep, you're creating momentum, and that's helping you lift through. So that's okay, I guess, if you're training on your own. If you're training on your own, you do as many strict reps as you can, and when you feel like you can't do any more, then it's okay to give it a little cheat. But preferably have a training partner there. You don't need to do that because they can just help you through that sticking point, which generally is in the middle of the curl. Most of the basic exercises that we consider to be the size builders, you'll note. Most of the stress is in the middle of the movement. I call them mid-range movements, so not so much at the beginning, not so much at the end, but in the middle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to help you through that, and then you're going to lower it down, and then between us, we're just going to like throw it up to the top, so you can lower it down for some extra negatives. Now you're going to like freak me out and do like 20 reps or something now, right? Okay, let's go. Right, one at a time, very strict. Don't throw it. Don't start with the old heave-ho. Come on, I'm there. 2. Good. And again. 3. That's yours. Let's go. Come on, that's yours. 4. All yours. And again. Just close by. 5. That's all yours. I didn't do anything. Come on, one more. Pull. Biceps, biceps, biceps. A little bit, little bit. Nice. Keep it like that. One more, one more. Come on, one more. Big pull. Big curl. Up. Squeeze, 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 squeeze. Very slow down now. Very slow, very slow. Okay, I'm going to throw it up. Let's throw it up. Come on, let's get it up. And hold it. Tight, 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 tight. One more. Up. And hold it. We've got one more. Still controlling the weight. Come on. Up. Last one. Hold it there. Hold it there. Come on. Slow it down. Slow it down. Slow it down. Great. How's the biceps?
Tell me.
Hey. Only one tip there. I think I didn't notice till you started, your stance was a bit narrow, so you weren't quite stable. Much better if you come out like shoulder width, but apart from that, absolutely perfect. So that would be that exercise done with. We'll just move on to another exercise after this. And biceps, of course, it's a showy muscle and everything. It shows your biceps, but it's a small muscle with a relatively simple function of bending the arm and supinating the wrist. So probably 2 exercises is enough, 2 different angles. Thanks, Mindy.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
All right, anyone got any questions at this point? Microphone, sir.
So you mentioned that you would typically only do 2 warm-up sets.
Yeah.
Would that be true even in the case of something like squats, where presumably you went very heavy in your prime and...
Maybe on a squats or a leg press, maybe it might require one more set. It's kind of like a judgment thing, If you feel like ready, you're warm and you're ready and you can go and you feel safe to go to the max, then I say go to the max. It's not. You don't need to do tons of warm-up sets, but obviously you need to do enough to feel safe. Legs, I generally start with leg extensions first to like pre-exhaust the quads. So. I'd probably just do 2 warm-up sets on there. So my quads are already really pumped. By the time I've done leg extensions, 3 sets and the last one's to failure, maybe some extra negatives and forced reps, quads are blown out, right? So now you're going to go to squat or leg press, whichever compound exercise you choose for your structure works better for you. I squatted a lot when I was young, when I first started, because Tom Platz was the man then, And Tom Platz said the squats were the best thing you could do for legs, and who can argue with him? He had the best legs ever. So everyone in the gym was squatting in those days. I even bought the flat shoes to do the squats and everything. But I got injured. I tore a muscle on my hip a little bit when I was young. And there was a lot of, for me, I leaned forward a bit, so there was a lot of glutes and lower back. And I had that injury, so it kind of forced me to experiment with other things. So I started doing leg press as my main compound movement, and then followed by hack squats or squats on a Smith machine with the quads, with the feet a little bit forward. So the quads are doing more of the work and the glutes and the lower back doing less. And for me, that worked better than doing squats. So I went to Mr. Olympia. During my whole pro career, I was not doing free weight squats. I was doing, when I was an amateur, but I switched. I was doing squats on the Smith machine, going up to like, near enough 600 pounds on the Smith machine. So I was going heavy on those, but not free squats. Yeah, so answer your question, leg extensions first, pre-exhaust the quads, and then the leg press or the squats afterwards, and at that point, 2 warm-up sets would be enough. But use your judgment, you know. All right. Yeah, go ahead, sir.
So you've had a barbell row basically named after you, the Yates row.
That's right, yeah.
When did you transition, or did you always do it that way from when you started? When did you transition from another style, you know, the standard row, to the Yates row? When did that become your mainstay?
Well, I use the Yates row, the reverse grip row, because I noticed a lot of people were weak in the lower lats. And this allowed me to get my elbows back slightly bit more than the regular grip. And the 2 contests that I lost in my career was my first professional show, I got second to Mohammed Benaziza. My first Mr. Olympia, I got second to Lee Haney. And both of those guys like really inspired me with the thickness of their back. It was almost 3D like on the lower. So I really wanted to work on that. And then 1994, I tore my bicep doing that. And not because the exercise was faulty. It was a combination of, I remember when I was coming to do the rows, my right hand was going around nice and easy, and my left hand I was having to like force it round. And what I realize now, and that's what's great about this convention, you've got so many like injury specialists, sports medicine specialists here. I just had the fascia stretching thing outside. I did it yesterday as well. And I was telling the guys there, I wish all this was available when I was lifting weights, because we really didn't know anything, you know. And what I know now from my own, you know, treatments and observations was that this shoulder was already slightly damaged. So it was like turning around. So then I was forcing the hand round and tying it on with the strap. So it was in a position that wasn't very comfortable. And I got to win the Mr. Olympia and set this new standard by just training all out heavy all the time. And this was getting up to a contest. It was 6 weeks out. And what I do when I train people now, I advise them, look, you train to failure to trigger that muscle growth, right? But for that to take place, you've got to be taking sufficient calories in. When you're getting ready for a contest, you're limiting your calories. You're not going to be able to grow. You know, if you can maintain most of your muscle, that's a good job done there. So I tell people not to train to failure or beyond failure. Last couple of months before a competition, you can take it somewhat easy. You know, still push. You're near enough to, you know, maybe 1 rep short of failure or something. That's enough to maintain your muscle mass. At that point, that's what you're trying to do in the gym. Maintain your muscle mass as much as you can. Then you're reducing your calories. You're doing more cardio to burn the fat. So, but I wasn't doing that. I was trying to do 440 bent over rows, just as I was doing in the off season. I kind of had this mentality: I don't want to go down on my weights because then I'm getting smaller and weaker, and you know, which I know now was a mistake. So even Mr. Olympians make mistakes, and they have to learn from them, and hopefully other people can learn from my mistakes. So if you're getting ready for a contest, don't push it to the point of failure, as you do in the off season, as we're talking about. So I don't know if have we got more weights. Being as we're talking about back, and we can use this one if we lay this on the floor. And then, being as you asked a question, let's get you up here, sir. We're not going to try to go to failure on this because, you know, if you're not warmed up properly and everything, that could be dangerous. But let's just look at the form, at the technique. Okay, so training back. What's the function of the lats, which is the main muscle group that we're trying to? It's upper arm, down and back. So whether you're doing a pull down, upper arm down and back, or if you're bent over, it's still down and back relative to your torso. And a key thing that not a lot of people realize And perhaps that's one of the reasons my back was so good, partly genetics, partly technique. And the people I train as well benefit a lot from this. In order to get a real contraction of the lats, your spine has got to be arched. So when you pull down, at the top it doesn't really matter, but when you pull down to the contracted position, the spine has got to be arched. If you're pulling down like this, you can see that, you're using more arms. You've got to arch and contract. So the same thing with the rows. And what I did as well, to put the lower back in a stronger position, to put more emphasis on the lats rather than traditionally, I think before I started doing this, bent over rows were traditionally brought into the chest, which is fine if you want to work your rhomboids, lower trapezius and rear delts. But I wanted to emphasize more on the lats and the lower lats. And if you get a real contraction in the lats, it should almost feel like a little cramping sensation. When I train people in the gym, first thing I do is I put them on the lat pull down with a light weight, just so they can get that technique and they can feel that cramping. And I say you've got to try to maintain that throughout the workout when you get heavier. So I'll be pulling in to my waist. And also the other thing that I did was lift the body, upper body, up above parallel, probably about 70 degrees, so the bar is kind of going to come down by the knees, and pull in and back down under control. Pretty simple movement. It's a bit more of a power movement, so don't necessarily try and hold it. Just get it in there and control it on the way down. I'm gonna do it with an overhand grip, just because I did get that bicep injury, and it feels more comfortable to do that. So perhaps I'll turn it to the side so the audience can see a bit better. And interestingly, I did pretty much, most of the exercises when I was younger until I, as I said, kept my training diaries and feedback, narrow it down to what was really working. And in the end, I did absolutely no wide grip exercises. So no wide grip pull downs or chins. I did Nautilus pullover machine, which is probably the best weight training machine ever made. Unfortunately, you don't see a lot of them in gyms because they're not appreciated. The thing about the Nautilus pullover is, as we're saying, upper arm down and back. So it goes all the way from here, all the way down to here, like 180 degrees, and there's no biceps involved. It's just isolating the lats. So the bicep is kind of the weak link in back. You're pulling, there's a smaller muscle group, perhaps. I don't know whether it does or not, but let's say perhaps the bicep fails before the lats have really got 100%. So if you can pre-exhaust them, I love the pullover machine, but as I said, most gyms don't have them. If you don't have that, you've got two substitutes. Not as good, but they do work the lats without the involvement of the bicep. One is the pullover across the bench, which in the old days everyone used to call that a chest exercise, but there's very little pec involvement in it. But you're bringing the upper arms down and back, so it's like half the movement of a pullover machine. Well, the other one you got is pull down machine from here with the stiff arms bringing it down, which is more like the bottom half of the pullover movement. I prefer the dumbbell just because when you get up to some decent weights, it's just very hard to kind of stabilize yourself with that. Anyway, so I would generally start with the pullovers, 3 sets as we discussed before. Then I'll go to pull downs. Lats are already super pumped up, but we bring the biceps in. So we've got to do 1 set at least on the pull downs to warm up, 1 set to failure, and beyond failure. And then the third exercise I would do is rows with a barbell or a dumbbell. I'd alternate the barbell with a 1-arm dumbbell row. I wouldn't do both in the same workout, consider them to be pretty much similar exercises. All right, so the barbell row is going to look like this. So you notice the top spine is arched, and once you get in that position, lift it up about here, Helps if you've got a mirror, actually, and keep your head up and keep your eyes in the mirror. And you pull in and you control down. So there's no, the old heave-o, I call it, no body movement at the start to get it going. Most people are doing this, and they're creating momentum to get the bar going rather than using muscle power. Right, whenever go, you can do reverse grip if you like. Good. Look, you can see the lats contracting here at the bottom. Great. And middle traps here, lower traps. Perfect. Good job, man. Well done. Okay, any more questions? Anyone else want to come up and try some exercises, try a barbell row? Don't be shy. Try the barbell row? Okay. As long as it's not too heavy, you tell me. All right. However you feel comfortable. It's more about your body position, pulling in, arching the back, control it on the way down, no body movement. And your lower back is, in this position, is a very safe and stable position. So you don't go down and pull up, use the momentum to get it going. Just lock your body and pull into your waist, okay? Okay, upper body, more up, bit more. Okay, there, perfect. One, a little bit lower in the waist. Two, there you go. Three. Boom. Four, bit powerful on the way up. Boom. That's it. Two more. Okay, great. Good job, man. So, 2 or 3 sets on here. After doing the pullover and the pull downs, I generally used to do just 2 sets. You're bringing the lower back into play a little bit, so it's a good idea to warm up. I generally used to warm up with about 310 or 330 or something like that, and go up to about 440. If anyone's seen my training video, the first set I do is I think 310 or 320. So I say that's a good weight there for a small woman, you know.
What was your preferred training frequency?
I had a 4-way split. Ultimately, we're talking about when I was a professional. When I was younger and I was doing some heavy work and stuff like that, I was generally training 3 times a week only. But as a professional, I split it 4 ways. So it was shoulders, traps, triceps was one workout. It's a fairly easy one. Followed by back, which is a heavy, more taxing on your system as a whole, on your nervous system and so on. Then I would take a day off after that. A lot of people ask me, well, is it okay to go to the gym every day? Because I can do chest one day and shoulder and so on. I'd rather not do that because every time you go to the gym, you're kind of taxing your nervous system. So I think it's a good idea to have total days off from the gym. So it'd be 2 days on, 1 day off, and then I'd do chest and biceps, followed by legs, with a day or 2 off after legs, depending on how I was feeling. A lot of times I took 2 days off after legs because it was so exhausting on your whole system when you do legs. And you do, generally to failure on legs, which most people might think they do. A lot of people think they're going to failure until they come and train with me, and then they realize they weren't really, I'm quite good at seeing what people can do. They usually got 1 or 2 more in there. And I remember, actually I stole this from Mike Menzer, There was a guy training with me the other week, and I knew he just had a baby recently. So I said, when you think you failed on a set, just imagine that somebody's got a gun to your kid's head and they're saying, do one more, otherwise I'm going to pull the trigger. And that's the kind of motivation you got to, you got to have. I'm sure if somebody did that to you, you would find that one rep, So you got to be motivated to do this kind of training. And a big help in that was those training diaries, because I would sit down before I went to the gym, and I would see, right, this is what I did last week. I did whatever, 200 pounds for 7 reps. I got to try and beat that this week, So I had a goal in mind, and of course you can't do that all the time continuously, beating yourself, because it becomes increasingly difficult the bigger and stronger you get to get any kind of progress. And I would train like this in this fashion, probably 5 or 6 weeks in my experience. After that, you're looking at getting burnt out, When I was a kid, I used to try and do continuously. And I noticed what happened every 2 or 3 months. I was getting sick. I used to come down with a sore throat or something like that. Obviously, my whole system, my immune system, was getting overtrained. So I wanted to avoid that. I started cycling 5 or 6 weeks, heavy all-out training, and then a couple of weeks lighter kind of maintenance training. At least that was the idea, That's what I told myself I was doing, but I never really trained light enough on those down cycles. So that's another lesson, The front. Yeah, you, sir.
So, other than taking a couple of lighter weeks, you've mentioned did you use almost the same exercises for months and years at a time, and very similar repetition range for months and years at a time?
Absolutely. I used to read in the magazines when I was a kid, like, you got to change your routine every 2 months or something like this. But I think that's BS. It's like, you should cycle the intensity of your training. As I said, 5 or 6 weeks, perhaps going all out, a couple of weeks lighter, where you're maintaining and just, putting enough resistance on the muscle and getting blood through there. And if you want to kind of change the exercises around then, just, to alleviate some kind of boredom or whatever. And that's the only reason to change an exercise, if you're becoming mentally stale and bored with the exercise, and you change it to something else. Maybe you're doing barbell row and you change to one-arm dumbbell row and you're more fired up because it's something different. It's more a mental thing, I believe, than a physical thing. Your body just knows how hard the muscles are, what intensity level they're firing at. It doesn't know if you're doing a barbell row or a machine row or whatever, And I think if you asked any of the successful bodybuilders, Arnold or Lee Haney, anyone like that, they pretty much got the same routine. My routine from back, once I got to pro level, didn't really vary that much. It was always start with a Nautilus pullover machine, then a close grip pull down to the chest, barbell row or dumbbell row, and a seated base pulley row, which I'd have a bit of medium grip and bring the elbows out, as opposed to pull over where it's close to the body, pull down row where the arms are traveling close to the side, and primarily lats, where with the elbows out and contracting, then you're doing more rhomboids, middle trapezius, and so on. So that was it, and usually I would finish with either deadlifts or this machine, hyperextensions. I used to vary it because I didn't want to do deadlifts every workout. I thought it was too taxing on the lower back and the system. And the deadlifts, well, I'll demonstrate the deadlifts, although this is pretty lightweight. The deadlifts I used to do initially from the floor. And then so not putting it down on the floor in between the reps. The idea behind that is to keep the tension on the back. Every time you put it on the floor, your back's kind of relaxing, and then the initial lift from the floor is a lot of glutes and quads and so on. And that way I didn't have to use so much weight, especially at the end of the workout after doing all those exercises. You don't need to use too much weight. If I did it first in a powerlifting style, yeah, I could lift more weight. But as I discussed before, a bodybuilder's job is not to lift more weight. It's simply to put more stress on the muscle, try and create more muscle growth. Yeah. In the off season, I just did very little cardio, like a couple of times a week, 25, 30 minutes on a stationary bike, just to keep some kind of cardio conditioning, which I think is important. You know, especially when you're doing heavy work like back and legs and so on, it's very taxing on your cardiovascular system, on your breathing and so on. And if that's a bit more efficient and you can recover more efficiently between the sets, I think that's a good thing. But if you do too much cardio or too much intensity on your cardio, it's like you're sending your body two different signals, you know? You're sending a signal for muscle mass and strength, and then you're sending a signal for, you know, more cardiovascular and more to the slow twitch fibers. Having said that, getting ready for a competition, I did a lot more, but not high intensity. I used to do 45 minutes in the morning and 45 to an hour at night, but I used to consider walking my dog cardio. So go for a brisk dog walk. That was I did both. I generally used to do cycling in the morning and the evening walking. So either or. Get the heart rate up to maybe, I don't know, like 115, 120 or something. So it's not high-end cardio. It's more like just calorie burning, you know. And exactly, yeah. Exactly. Yeah, well, you know, Mike Mensa used to say, you know, if I ask you to go outside and sprint, how long can you sprint for before the sprint becomes a semi-jog, you know? The same thing with training intensity. How long can you really give it 100% for before you start, you know? You start backing off. And if you got like 5 or 6 sets ahead of you, let's say on a barbell row, right? You always get that in the back of your mind. You know, I got 2 more sets to do, or 1 more set, or whatever, and I don't think you're giving 100%. If I say to you, right, warm up now, load the bar up to, you know, kind of maximum weight that you can do for an 8-rep set, and we're just going to give 100% to this set, everything, concentrating on muscle fiber, stretching, contracting, controlling the negative, exhausting every part of that, every part of every rep on that set until it's total failure. And when you've done that, you know, we move on to something else. There's some psychology behind it as well as the physical aspect.
Obviously, training like that takes a lot of stress on your body. What types of foods were you eating in the off season to be able to allow you to train like this?
Off season or pre-contest, eating pretty much the same things. Just a bit less carbohydrates, getting ready for a contest. So 5 or 6 meals a day. Protein foods were a lot of egg whites. I used to eat like, I think 24 egg whites a day. 12 in the morning, 12 later on. I used to mix those with oatmeal, some oatmeal and some banana and stuff like that. So egg whites, each meal. If you take your body weight and you do each pound of body weight, so like 1.5 grams. So if you're 200 pounds, we're looking at 300 grams of protein a day, and divide it through the day fairly evenly. So if you did 6 meals, that would be like more or less 50 grams a meal. So I think it's good to like mix the protein sources up. So not, you know, all fish or all chicken. I used to use egg whites with some egg yellows. If I was doing it now, I probably would just do the whole eggs. But then we're a bit more, you know, kind of freaked out about the fat, trying to keep the fat low. And now, you know, we know the fat is valuable in the diet. So anyway, I'd probably do like 12 egg whites with 2 or 3 yolks. for breakfast. Then I would have probably a shake. That was a light meal because I have that about an hour and a half before I went to the gym, so I didn't want anything heavy on the stomach. Then I'd do turkey breast or chicken breast. And the carbohydrate foods, as I said, in the morning, oatmeals, maybe a bit of fruit, whole grain rice, vegetables like spinach, broccoli, asparagus, green vegetables. In the evening, I'd have usually have beef, like very lean ground beef or lean steak, with sweet potatoes, vegetables, and another shake in there probably later on, and more oatmeal and egg whites. So pretty basic stuff. Depends on your body weight. So I'm obviously just talking about myself here. In the off season, I'll probably be around 6,000 calories, 6.5 maybe. Getting ready for a contest, I'd start just under 5,000 calories probably. And by the time the contest came around, I might have been down to 4,000 or so. So it's, I mean, a lot more than I eat now actually. Probably eat like a couple of thousand calories a day now. I eat twice a day. But I'm not carrying all that muscle mass, so I'm not burning all those calories. So a slight reduction in the carbohydrates really. The protein and the fat stays the same as in the off season. So bring the carbs down a little bit and bring the activity level up. As I said, you know, cardio exercise, but not super intense, moderate cardio for a bodybuilder. We're not trying to be marathon runners or anything like that. We're trying to build maximum muscle mass and strength. If you do too much intense cardio, it's kind of going to interfere with that. So that was pretty much it for a contest. Any more questions? Yes.
Would you go past concentric failure on something like barbell bent over rows or some rest bottom?
I used to go to failure, and then when I couldn't do a full rep, I couldn't get all the way in to the stomach, I would do maybe a 3/4 rep and a half rep, you know, because some exercises are just not practical to do beyond failure. For instance, a barbell row, I mean, unless you're going to lie on the floor and try and spot your training partner. So, and some exercises are more convenient for forced reps or even negatives, extra negative reps, which I didn't use a lot, you know, because it's very intense. I just generally slowed the negatives down all the time to try and tax that part of the movement. More explosive on the positive and slower down on the negative. Again, listening to Bill yesterday, he had kind of a mental exercise that was exactly the same that I did on pressing movements, pressing for chest, pressing for shoulders, squatting, leg pressing for legs. And that is, when I was doing the negative, I would picture like a big, if you can imagine a big coiled spring, like on a car suspension. So it's like this, and as you bring the weight down, it's getting compressed. So you're tight and you bring it down, all that energy is getting compressed. And then without bouncing or using momentum, on the way up. So you release all that energy on the way up. So I used to do these kind of mental exercises as well. So barbell row is one of those things where you're just going to go to failure and you can do some partial reps. And then on the pull downs or the cable row, you can have your training partner there spotting, you know. So.
Looking back, if you could change anything in your training, would you change anything going into what you know now?
Yeah, I would. I would cycle the intensity properly. I would listen to my body more when I had, you know, minor injuries and inflammation and stuff like that, instead of just being gung-ho and just pushing through it all the time. And I would train lighter and with slightly less intensity in a contest period. You know, I was always scared to be using a bit less weight and everything, but you know, your body fat's going down. You might be slightly dehydrated. You're not sleeping properly. I don't know how many of you have done a contest diet, but generally the sleep gets messed up because, you know, your body's waking you up all the time and saying, hey, wake up and eat, you're starving, you know? And you got to go like, nope, I can't eat, you know? So I used to get up in the middle of the night, watch MTV or something, you know? So your sleep is broken. So your recovery, you know, you're not 100%, and that's setting yourself up for an injury. I had two serious injuries as Mr. Olympia. I had a bicep tear in 1994, and I had a tricep tendon tear in 97, and interestingly enough, both on the same side. And I believe that, now with my knowledge, I believe that originated with some kind of injury or impingement or change of motion coming from the shoulder. There was some scar tissue in there, and it was slightly rotated round, and you get one injury, it's like a weak link in a chain. You know, the stress will go somewhere else on that limb, and then later on you might get an injury somewhere else. So both of those injuries, 6 weeks before the Mr. Olympia 94, I tore the bicep. The bicep, as far as the injury go, wasn't as bad as the tricep tendon, because that was a tendon detachment. The bicep was in the muscle belly, and it just kind of ripped and moved up. So the bicep now was shorter, but the tendon was still attached. So I could still train with that, and after about 2 months was pretty much almost 100% strength. It was a little bit weaker on the curls and so on, but it wasn't noticeable. The tricep tendon, of course, if you detach a tendon, you can't lift anything until you get it reattached. So that was... Yeah, I tore it 3 weeks before the contest, which to a normal human being, that means you're out of the contest, right? But I experienced this in 94. I remember tearing my bicep in 94 and just being devastated, you know? And I remember thinking, that's it, you know, I won the Mr. Olympia in 92, I won the Mr. Olympia in 93, and set new standards for the sport, and everyone's saying this guy is unbeatable and no one's going to beat him in the next few years. And now I'm finished. You know, I've torn my bicep. And, you know, I get that negative voice initially going, and then I was like, but don't give up now. It's 6 weeks before the Olympia and you're in good shape. Like, let's carry on doing what you can do, right? Doing the diet, doing the cardio, training as good as you can train, working on trying to get the inflammation down. Do everything you can do, and if it turns out that you believe in the last week or two that, you know, it's hampering you that much that you're not going to succeed, you're not going to be able to win, then call it a day then. Don't call it a day now, 6 weeks out. So I already experienced that in 94, and I pulled through and I won the contest, although it wasn't my best. Neither 94 or 97 were my best shapes, but for obvious reasons, you know. It's very stressful having an injury and dealing with that, and you know, even your body, if you're stressed out, you hold a bit more water, you know, so it can affect your condition. So 3 weeks before I tore the tricep tendon, 97, and again, you know, I had that, wow, I'm finished, I'm not going to be able to do this. And then again, the more positive voice comes back and says, let's do what we can do. And at that point was very little. I wasn't able to train at all. I could train legs if I wanted to, but even holding on to the leg press or the leg extension was like scary, you know. So I really didn't train the last 3 weeks. I didn't even practice my posing, which was something I did religiously, getting up to a contest, up to an hour a day, practicing all the compulsory positions and doing my routine. And you know, that helps, gives you more control of the muscles, more separation and stuff, which I think is probably a bit missing from the competitions now. So I wasn't able to do it. I just did my cardio and stayed on my diet, and worked with a physio to try and get the swelling down and the bruising out of the arm and stuff like that. So obviously I wasn't at my best, but I managed to win that contest. And then afterwards, to be honest, 1997, I was starting to think about, you know, wanting to retire, because I did everything so 100% that I didn't have a normal life at all. And it was starting to get a bit like, wow, this is starting to feel like a job. It never felt like a job before. It felt like my passion, like I wanted to do it, and I was earning good money doing it, but that wasn't the reason I was doing it. 97, it started to feel like, I'm doing this because I kind of got to now, and I want to. So that thought was already there about maybe retiring and moving on, but it was just a thought. And because I had this injury and I wasn't at my best, I wanted to kind of redeem myself, so I thought I'm going to get the surgery and I'm going to come back next year and really, make that my last one and maybe go out on a more positive note and a positive feeling. But it wasn't to be. I had the surgery, which was successful, but first of all, the medial head was torn as well. So I already had a bicep injury on this left arm, which affected my front double bicep. Now I had a tricep injury, so the arm aesthetically was looking even worse. And strength-wise, I just couldn't, it was like the left side was much weaker. So I couldn't train properly. I couldn't do the heavy training that's required. So I had to be honest about that and say, okay, I don't have a choice now. I was thinking about retiring. Now I don't have a choice. So that's why I retired in 98. I announced my retirement. And I was speaking earlier on, right, Mindy, about retiring and how difficult that is. If you've been, I guess, an athlete in any sport at a professional level where you're super, and bodybuilding is so consuming, like all day. You don't just go to the gym and then, hey, I finished, you do the gym and then you got to eat every 2.5, 3 hours. And, I used to weigh my food and calculate the calories and everything. So you don't really live a normal life. At least I didn't, I was totally dedicated to what I was doing. Eating every 2.5, 3 hours. I didn't even have to look at my watch. In the end, I knew when it was time to eat. And, getting 10 hours of sleep a day. I used to sleep about 8 hours at night and then also sleep in the afternoon after training. And that was something I always did, So very, very consuming. But then when it's gone, you're like, what do I do now? I've been doing this since I was 21. I was 35 when I retired, and there's this hole in your life that this thing that was consuming all your energy is not there anymore, and you feel lost. So it took me some time to adjust to that, and in the end I dealt with it by saying nothing's going to ever replace that, because it is what it is. You're not going to do that again. But look at all the other things you can do now, all the freedom you have. You don't have to eat every 2.5, 3 hours. You don't have to go to bed at 11 o'clock every night. You can do what you want to do, You can travel and without having to carry a big bag with 6 meals in and, all this kind of stuff. So, I enjoy doing other things now. I do cycling, I do yoga, I do swimming sometimes. I still I've got to work out pretty much every day. I've got to do something, right? Because I just love training and pushing the body a little bit, but I don't necessarily have to do weights and I don't have to eat 6 times a day and stuff like that. So that's how I dealt with it eventually. It took a few years though. John?
Yeah, I'm curious about the camaraderie of the 90s.
Yeah.
There was a lot of it or not? I guess I'm a little disappointed these days that there's not more of it.
I think there was. Although I was a little bit outside, because I was this guy, the shadow from England that just trained in the dungeon and just turned up at contests. And that could have been a great strategy. It wasn't a strategy, it was just me being me. I was not that outgoing guy that wanted to take pictures all the time or smile and all this stuff. I just wanted to train and then just turn up with a package, And most of the other guys trained in California, generally at Gold's Gym, so they're probably like a tighter crew. But, we were all under contract to WIDA. So every year we used to do FIBO in Germany, which was a big expo, and every athlete was there, from the women, the guys, and shows like that we all get together and there was no competition, so it was a lot more, we'd hang out and have fun and stuff like that, so there was more camaraderie. Probably then in the off season, but when it came to contest time, at least for me, it was like, I'm not being friendly with anybody, because I come here to win this thing, And yeah, everybody got a bit more around the contest time, but especially me, And I did do a few things that kind of, little psychological things. I wouldn't talk to the guys much, and I'd wait until the last minute, keep the tracksuit on until and I know I can see you all watching, you're all waiting, right, for me to take the top off. I learned this one from Lee Haney because he did it to me in '91. Yeah. I was pumping up, then I was sitting down here. Then he casually walked in front of me and took the track top off, and I saw his back, and I was like, holy shit. Yeah, okay, I saw that, you know. So I kind of used to do that a lot, and supposed to share changing rooms, and I used to insist on just having my own room, not letting anyone else in there. So little things like that, you know. And then one year there was a new rule in that you can't take anyone backstage to help you pump up and oil up and stuff like that. So I purposely took someone with me. And he's a pretty big dude as well, so, you know. And Sean Ray got real upset. I was like, cool, you're getting upset. Like, you're not focusing on what you're doing, you know, like, you're getting upset with me, that's cool, you know. So little things like that. I mean, at the end of the day, you've got to have the physique on stage. It doesn't matter a shit what you do psychologically, but I backed it up with the physique as well. And apart from 97, when I had the injury, and, you know, normally I went to the show just feeling indestructible. Like, I've been training all year round, guys, you know, while you've been hanging out at the beach, chasing the girls, whatever, driving your fast cars, yeah. I've been in that sweaty, stinking, damp dungeon in England, just been busting my ass every day. And I've been on my diet. Even off-season, I've been weighing my food. I've been on my diet, and I haven't broken my diet even once. I know you probably have. I haven't. So I just felt really confident and powerful, and that people pick up on that as well, you know. So you've got to have the goods. It's no good doing psychological trickery if you look like crap. It's not going to help you, you know. Okay, so we've done chest, we've done back. We'll talk a little bit about legs. We don't have anything to really practically do that, but let me just run through that again. Pretty much always, I like to do leg extensions first. I just felt like if I do squats first or leg press, I feel it more in the joints and stuff like that. If I hammer the leg extensions to total failure and the quads are just blown out, then you're going to do squats or leg press where you bring in the glutes and the hamstrings. You're going to feel it a lot more because your quads are already pre-exhausted, so you're going to feel it less in those other muscle groups. So leg extensions, I mean, you do leg extensions to failure, real failure, and a couple of force reps and maybe even a couple of negatives. I mean, you feel sick. You feel physically sick and you can't hardly stand up. That's the real set to failure. I don't know if anyone's ever seen on YouTube, I think it's 2008, Chris Cormier came to train with me in England, and he ends up having convulsions on the floor, puking up outside the gym. And he's a professional, you know. And he's like, did the leg extensions. So I'm spotting him, come on, Chris, come on, come on. He's doing the leg extensions, and then he's like, and put it down and just come to get out of the seat. And I just went, boom, start barging back in the seat. And I sit down, man, sit down. You got like 3 more. And he's like, what? Yeah, he said, he's like, no one ever did that to me, barging me onto the leg extension like that. And, you know, Chris has trained with everybody, Robbie Robinson, Charles Glass, all those guys in Gold's Gym. And he said himself, he said, I never felt this before. I've never gone to this degree. So even a professional. And the people that come to train me pretty much say the same things in the gym. You know, because a lot of guys that come to train with me, they're trainers themselves. You pretty much got to have a certain level of ability and knowledge before you come and take the DY. Master trainer, it's not like I can take a beginner through this. You've got to have some knowledge already. So the guys come and they say, look, I'm a big fan and I watched the DVDs and I read the books and all this stuff, and I thought that I was training correctly and strictly and intensely. But it's all the little things, all the little things. I even teach people, like when they're benching or pushing a chest and stuff, to keep their lower body still and relaxed instead of wiggling about and moving the feet and stuff like that, because that's all energy. And if you're doing that, that's lost energy. Just relax. You put all your energy here, all your focus here, lowering it down under control, exploding up. Get your mind inside the muscle. What I often do when I'm training people is I'll just do like this, or like the guy today doing his lats. I'm just pointing to the, you know, where the contraction should be, and just switching on that connection, which is very important. It's really an art form how to lift weights properly for bodybuilding, to put the stress on the muscle. And it's okay when you're doing a light or a medium weight or you're not going to failure. Everyone can keep the form, right? But it's when you're in that and you're going to failure, every instinct is telling you to move or use another muscle group or use just to get through it, and you've got to override that and just say, no, I'm just going to stick in this form. And if you've got a good spotter there, then you're confident to do that. So that's what it's all about. It's all about controlling the weights. So, I was known for like being strong as a bodybuilder and using heavy weights, but that was just the end product of my training. That was not my goal. And I could have lifted more weights if that was what it was about. If I use a little momentum, a little movement and stuff like that, I could use more weights.
Talking about legs, talk about your calf training. Shooting at 1,000 pounds calf.
Yeah, if you look, I mean, it's all it's all over the internet. Yeah, my training now, so you can look and you pick up the leg and the calf training. So fortunately, it's an interesting story, a little bit off the subject, but anyway, I won the British Championships in 1986. I won the heavyweight, so I was 24 years old, and I came back from winning the British Championships and went back to my one-bedroom apartment on a council estate. I don't know if you know what a council estate in England is like. I guess it's like projects in America or whatever. It's government housing anyway. So one-bedroom flat apartment with no carpet on the floor, with not a proper bed, just a mattress on the floor, an old TV that didn't work properly, and a cooker, and that's it. No car, catch the bus everywhere. That's all I had. I was British champion. I was still like coming home with my trophy, back to this, and no fanfare, no TV, no newspapers or nothing like that. Anyway, then I had somebody that the gym business was really new, especially in the UK then, in the mid-80s. There was hardly any gyms around, but it was just starting, and people could see the opportunity there. So I had two people offer me exactly the same deal, and that was that they would pay for all the equipment in the gym. I would choose it, which, wow, that's great. I'll choose it, and then I'll run the gym. They just invest. I'll run the gym. Then we'll pay all the overheads, and then the profits left, we'll split it 50-50. And they both said to me, Dorian, of course, we're not going to be there. So you can, both of them said the same thing separately. You can rip us off if you want. And, it's all cash money and stuff. But we just know that you won't. Which was, so that was nice. I remember that. Somebody backed me to open the temple gym and pay for all the equipment. And I remember going to an equipment manufacturer that was pretty local, and he made all his own stuff. He used to copy the Nautilus machines. He went to a Nautilus gym somewhere and just measured everything up and perfect copies. So actually my pullover machine, my tricep machine, my bicep machine, which were Nautilus, my leg curl, my leg extension was Nautilus, but they weren't genuine Nautilus. They were just copies, but very good copies. And I was always disappointed when I went to the gyms that the calf machine was too light, I couldn't really go to failure. I used to do a lot of reps because it was too light. So I got him to make a 1,000-pound calf machine, and then with some handles on the side to put extra weights on there. So I got up to doing actually 1,500 pounds on the calf raise for like 10 or 12 reps. And my calf training. Nothing special, really. Let's be honest, the guy that has an outstanding body part is not necessarily the best guy to ask. Having said that, I do know about calf training. But my calves were outstanding because they were genetically predisposed to be that way. I haven't done a calf raise, since I retired because I don't need to. And calves are still pretty, probably better than the majority of the Olympia stage right now, and I don't do anything. So keep that in mind. But there's a lot of misconceptions about calf training. And I think this is probably because there is a big variance genetically between the length of muscle bellies. If you remember earlier on, I was talking about the length of muscle bellies. So if you want to look at a potentially great bodybuilder, you want to have a good skeletal structure, wide shoulders relative to the hips, and slightly longer legs relative to the upper body because that looks more aesthetic. And uniformly long muscle bellies all over the body. A muscle can never be wider than it is long because it wouldn't function. So there's a limit there, right? So if you've got a shorter bicep or a shorter calf or a shorter pecs or whatever, or shorter lats, high attachments, your ultimate level that you can get to is going to be much less than somebody has got a longer bicep. You know, somebody right down to the elbow with a muscle belly, you're going to have much more potential for growth. My biceps probably average at best. They're kind of medium, where the rest of my body's mostly long muscle bellies. So because there's a lot of variance between calves, more than anywhere else, I think. You've got some guys with a very high muscle bellies in the calves like this. So you're dealing with a short muscle belly. It's never going to be able to be as huge as somebody that's got twice the volume, twice the length of the muscle belly. So because of that, I think there's so many misconceptions about calf training. And one of the stupidest things that I used to hear is, because you walk all day on your calves, you've got to do lots more reps and sets to make them grow. I'm like, hold on, so you're doing lots of reps and sets basically walking around, yeah, so you're going to duplicate that and hope that it's going to create growth? That doesn't make any sense. So in short, you've got to train them exactly the way you train another muscle group, and that is full range of movements. I see a lot of people on the calf machine and they're like bouncing up and down like that. That's not really going to do anything. You're going to get your heels all the way down, full stretch. Come all the way up, exaggeratedly on your toes. Like, I used to think like I was a ballet dancer, like trying to get right up on our toes. Control the negative on the way down. Make it work on the way down. Full stretch, all the way back up again. You need two exercises. You need one with the legs straight, so it could be standing calf raise, could be donkey raise, could be on a leg press machine. If the machine's good, I prefer a standing calf raise. It's just easier. And then one with the leg bent at 45 degrees, which obviously the only thing is a seated calf raise. So you need one with the legs straight, one with the legs bent. The reason for that is the legs straight, you work in the gastrocnemius the most. With the legs bent, you work the soleus, which is lying underneath. So there's two muscle groups involved there. And you just hammer them to failure. 2 sets of standing calf raises, 2 sets of seated calf raises. That's what I did. And full range to failure. Some forced reps if you can. We used to just be behind on the standing calf raise, the training partner. So when it's getting sticky at the top, to get that full contraction, just push a little bit. But obviously, if there's 1,500 pounds on there, you're not going to be able to lift too much of that, you know. And the same thing with the seated calf raise. So right to failure and a couple of forced reps. And that's it, really.
Sorry if I get you to use the mic.
Okay, who's got a question? Step up to the mic.
Come on up.
Hi.
I just want to ask you, what was your eating like before training and after training, and how long before and after would you do it?
Okay, so I used to train as a professional. I could choose when I wanted to train, and I chose a late morning. And so I used to have my breakfast. Then about 2 hours later, I'd have a shake. It was just a protein shake, maybe with a little bit of carbs in there, banana or something like that. And that would be about an hour to an hour and a half before I went to the gym. So my breakfast was heavier, so that kind of been digested, and then a light meal before I went to the gym, which was a shake. A lot of people think, well, you know, I'm going to the gym, I'm going to work out, I need energy, so I'm going to drink some carbs, some sugar or something like that. That's probably the worst thing you can do, because if you take sugar in, your body just releases insulin, and then, you know, your sugar level goes down and you get an energy crash. So don't take one of these energy drinks before you train. Best time to take an energy drink, actually after training, because then your body will release insulin, but because the muscles are so depleted, it will help shift, the amino acids towards the muscle. So a protein shake with a little bit of carbs in, I felt that was ideal before training. And after training, eventually what I was doing was like that, taking a sugary drink or dextrose or something like that with some whey protein, taking the glutamine and branched-chain amino acids, creatine, anything that I wanted to like push into the muscle after training. And then about 30 minutes after that, not too long after that, I would take what I call just a balanced meal. So protein, lean protein like chicken or turkey, usually rice or sweet potato, and green fibrous vegetables. And that would be after training.
Was that always the case, or did you evolve your nutrition and the timing?
I evolved. I didn't realize how much I had evolved until I was looking back doing this documentary the other day, getting the old training diaries out, and I had a can of tuna, and I had a pint of skim milk, which with Joe Weider's milk and egg protein, and a chocolate bar, and things like that. So yeah, I didn't have that much money when I was a kid. I was on a budget as well. So as I got more educated, I got a bit more refined. But same kind of meal frequency and so on. Six meals a day or so on. Okay?
Great, thank you.
All right, thanks. All right, anyone else? Any training questions? We've done legs, we've done back. Lady, yeah, good question from a lady.
How often do you train now? You said you do different workouts. Do you still go to the gym and lift heavy?
Well, I was going, but I got a torn supraspinatus on this side. I got a tricep tear, which is repaired, but it's somewhat weak, and I got a bicep injury. So most of the upper body, back wasn't so bad. I could still kind of row pretty heavy, although this shoulder doesn't really feel stable. And I love to train. I love to like push myself, So the only thing I could really do that on was legs. That's why Chris Cormier came, and I trained with him. I did rep set for set and buried him, even though he was a professional. Because I enjoyed training the legs and pushing. But then I got these big quads, I can hardly get any jeans to fit, and I started cycling and doing other things, and I just think these things are just like, what do I need these things for, I don't need them anymore. I'm not a competitive bodybuilder, and it's a bit, imbalanced because I can't train. So the last year, I probably did very little weight training. I do a little bit of rotor cuff work and very light, little bit of shoulders and chest, but it's very limited because of this injury. So I do other things to kind of satisfy that, I probably would have laughed at myself if I'd have told myself this 20 years ago, but I'm loving doing yoga right now. I know, not very blood and guts, but...
And your nutrition too, is it changed
my
a
nutrition now is very low in animal protein. It's more like a plant-based diet, because I read a lot on nutrition for health now. And that's where I'm at. I'm not a bodybuilder anymore, and I think it's important to evolve. A lot of people just get caught in this, I'm a bodybuilder, so I'll only eat and train like a bodybuilder for the rest of my life. And I thought, I don't need to do that, because I'm not a competitive bodybuilder anymore. And I've got a good degree of muscle mass. So I do yoga a couple of times a week, but, good. And I love the fact that it's increased my mobility and flexibility and stuff like that, and I feel like I can breathe better. I felt a little bit like kind of compressed from all the years of heavy training. So I do yoga a couple of times a week with a private teacher. I do cycling. I do cycling up some nasty mountains in Spain. That's where I live now, and there's a lot of professional cyclists go up there, up and down the hills and stuff. So I go up there, and that's a challenge, just to get to the top. I'm still weighing 230, and most of these guys are 120 pounds or something. So I enjoy the challenge of doing that. And I do some kettlebell work as well, kettlebell swings and stuff for some very intense cardio. So I do the biking, it's a bit longer cardio, and I do the short bursts in the gym, which is like 10 or 15 minutes, but very, very intense. Get the heart rate up right to 160, 165, something like that. So everything I'm doing now is geared to being practical and what I need at this stage in my life, which is to be healthy, flexible, mobile, and a good degree of cardio and so on. So I don't do a lot of weights now. I teach other people, but I don't do a lot myself. Maybe next year I'll start, go back and do more. But I've been training weights for 30 years, so I thought I'd give myself a break and just do something else, do something different instead of just getting caught in one way of doing things. Yeah.
Could you speak a little more about when you kind of retired and how that transition was, and when you, finally, I guess, packed in the gym and started eating normal and being okay with it?
It took a long time for me to. I never stopped training, and I think that kind of saved me at one point because I was very depressed for a year or two, and if I'd have just lay in bed or something, that would have been the worst thing to do. So the fact that I made myself go to the gym every morning, and I got, I used to train with Leroy, but when I retired, we kind of parted ways. He went and worked another job, and so I got a new training partner in the gym who was younger than me and enthusiastic. So I used to turn up at the gym every morning and train, and that's still my thing. I might go, if I'm traveling and I'm busy, I might go a week without doing any exercise, but then I start to feel the shitty, I got to go. This morning I just went to the gym downstairs and did a bit of work, some stretching and some cardio. I've got to do something to feel alive. So I didn't stop weight training and going to the gym, and my shoulder injury was not as bad then as it is now, so it wasn't limiting me as much. And I was still eating the chicken breast and all this stuff, and it took me a long time. Probably took me about, I don't know, it probably took me more than 6 years to stop doing mental arithmetic in my head. When they bought me a meal in a restaurant, I just got this thing in my head like a computer. I was like, okay, there's so much protein there, so many carbohydrates, so many calories. Just in my head all the time, like, shut up, man, it doesn't matter anymore. But I couldn't shut this guy up, So it took a long time to kind of transition out of that. And it was just a gradual thing. And it's only now, 20 years after 19 years after I did my last contest, that I'm feeling comfortable. I'm having a break from doing weights and doing something else. And I think that's more beneficial for me now. I got more range in my joints and feel looser, and I probably dropped 20, 25 pounds in the last couple of years just doing that and changing my diet. And I love to read about nutrition, supplementation, and so on for health now. That's my goal. And for bodybuilding, you need a high level of protein, and it's going to be basically animal protein. And as you're getting older and health-wise, it's probably not the best thing to do. Not terrible, not like eating McDonald's and sugar and stuff, but most of the studies, long-term studies, are saying for better health as you're getting older and so on, that you don't need a lot of protein. So I'll probably get maybe 100 grams of protein a day. I have a shake in the morning, a big shake. I throw everything in the blender, some fruit, some avocado, bananas, some nuts, some coconut milk, coconut oil, some protein powder. Blend all that up with maybe some blueberries or something. So that's a great meal, but it's in a blender. Afternoon, I might have some chicken or fish, maybe. The rest of the day, it's mainly, rice, beans, lentils, fruits, nuts, that kind of thing. And that's what I need now for what I'm doing now. Okay? I think we're getting near to that time. Yeah? So I'd like to take a couple more questions if anyone's got anything they want to ask me. You get next. He's just stepping up, so you can come after this guy.
This is more so, there's been a lot of great speakers at this conference, so it's fantastic, and I appreciate you being here. So this question is more so a philosophical one. So based on your experience and your exposure to so much, what would you impart upon everybody that's here, just based on not just training, but in life in general, based on what you've been through?
Well, everything starts with the mind, and I've kind of mentioned that a few times as we're going through it, the psychology of things, and anything you want to do, training, business, relationships, whatever. You got to know what your goal is. What is your point? What do you want to do? You know. So you've got to have a goal, and I mean, you know, competing in a contest or you know, that could be a goal, but that's more like a long-term goal. So I used to set myself little goals, and reminding myself, looking back at my training diaries, like every month I used to write down, this is what I'm doing now. In 6 to 8 weeks, this is what I want to do. You know, achievable things like 20 more pounds on the bench press, or 10 pound on the curl, and things like that, or 1/4 inch on my arms. I used to measure all this stuff, you know, of all this feedback. So I have these goals, medium-term goals, you know, 6 to 8 weeks. And then I would make a goal for each workout. So I'd look, this is what I did last week. Right, get in the zone, sit down. This is what I did last week, 7 reps. I've got to do 8 reps. And I would actually do that in my mind, rehearse it, for mental rehearsal. I did a lot of things I didn't really know what they were. Now I know the terms, you know, but I was doing it anyway, instinctively. Mental rehearsal, and kind of going through that, set in my mind, how it's going to feel. Picture myself, even what shirt I'd be wearing and everything, and kind of go through it. So I've done it already in my mind. When I go to the gym, I know exactly what I'm doing. I know exactly which order of exercises. I know exactly what weight I'm going to put on the bar. I know exactly how many reps I'm going to go for, and I'm in that zone. I'm not wandering in the gym like, oh, okay, what shall I do today? If you go in with that attitude, you're not going to get very far. Anyone that goes to the gym the first year, they're going to develop, yeah, because body's unaccustomed to that exercise. So you'll develop, but then you see a lot of people in the gym, they're just always looking the same. They plateau after a certain, because at that point you've got to push it. You've got to really, you know, you've got to have goals and you've got to push towards them. So it's important to have goals and plan to get there, you know. If you go on a boat out to the, you know, sailing ship, and you're like, want to sail from England to America, and you've got no map, chances are you're not going to get there, you know. You didn't plot your route. It's the same thing with, you know, with training, with the business or whatever. You've got to have a plan, right? So I think that's important, the mental side of it. And keeping records, writing things down. If you write things down, I think it just makes it much more powerful. You write things down. I'm going to do this. I'm going to save this amount of money. I'm going to want to do this in the gym, or whatever it is. You write it down, it becomes, you know, you've written it down there, and you can read it every day. That's a good tip. I think that makes things a lot more powerful. So you've got to have goals. It helps to visualize what you're doing beforehand and rehearse it and so on. So that's some of the mental things that's involved in bodybuilding, but it can be used for anything that you want to be successful at, I think.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, sir, you got one?
I was just going to ask, the way you've evolved now, the way we're getting old, do you still implement this training for someone who's getting older?
That depends on that person. You know, like me, I've got a lot of injuries to deal with, and having absolute maximum muscle mass is not a goal for me. But if that was your goal, then yeah, I would recommend this kind of training, but you might have to tailor it a little bit to the individual. And here's something we haven't really talked about, but I should, and that's your recovery ability. So when you're going to the gym, you're not building muscle in the gym. You're breaking it down. You're damaging the muscle fiber, right, in the gym when you're pushing it. And I use this analogy sometimes. If you get a piece of sandpaper and you rub it on your hands here, like until the skin is broken and it's red and maybe it's bleeding a little bit, right? Now, if you go home and you rest and you leave your hand, it's going to heal up, right? And the skin's going to be a little bit thicker than it was before because it's trying to protect itself from that stress. So that's pretty much very simplistic, of course, but that's pretty much the process when you go to the gym. You're breaking the muscle down. Outside the gym, you're resting, you're giving the body correct nutrition. It's going to recover. First of all, it's going to recover. Then it's going to overcompensate if you put enough stress on, yeah? So you've got to allow enough time between the workouts, and that's going to vary from one person to another. So the system basically stays the same, but some people can train legs once every 6 days, or you know, a body part once every 7 days. Some people might be once every 8 days, or even 9 or 10 days, because some people don't have a great recovery ability. I think I have pretty good recovery ability, and let's put it out there and be honest. If you're taking anabolics, your recovery ability is going to be enhanced, right? So you're going to recover, somebody who's taking anabolics is going to recover quicker than if they weren't, or quicker than somebody that's not. So there's a lot of factors you've got to take in account there. If you're a trainer and you're training somebody on this method, you have to look at their feedback and be careful about that, and make sure you get enough recovery time. Because if you're not, you're just going in there and beating yourself up and breaking it down, and then you're coming back and doing it again before you've recovered properly. It's like the thing with the hand. You're rubbing it, it's starting to get bloody and all that, and then you go away. But before it's fully healed up, you come back and do it again. You just end up with a bloody hand, so you're not getting anywhere. So it's the same thing with training. If you're going to train intensely, you need to recover from that. That's very important. Bodybuilding is in the gym, but actually more of it's outside the gym, with your sleep and your nutrition and so on to help the recovery. Okay? Cool.
Yeah, just a question about if you could, like in this year's Olympia, you had Kevin Levrone come back, at 50 plus years. If you could turn the clock back 6 to 8 or 10 years, would you consider competing like Kevin Levrone and Dexter Jackson are still competing well, in their late 40s? And
I don't think so, because that zone you have to be in.
It's a different type of would you like the physiques now versus back when you were training?
Oh, is that your question?
Well, both. Like you. I should have double.
All right, I'll answer the last question first.
Sure, that's fair enough.
Well, maybe I'm prejudiced or whatever because I came from that era, but you look at the quality of the physiques from the 90s or even the 80s. I just believe you don't have that quality of physique now. The guys are generally maybe a little bigger and the muscles are rounder and fuller, but they don't have the separation, they don't have the quality, they don't have the serrations between the muscle groups and the cross serrations on a tricep and all that kind of stuff. And I was talking to John earlier on about why that is, because I'm not really in the mix as far as what everyone's doing. But I think it's something they're doing pharmaceutically that's different from what we were doing in the 90s, and that gives the physique a different look. And obviously, there's a lot of controversy about the guys having a lot thicker bellies and waist, and they can't control the waist, and I think that's down to that as well. So I think the quality of the physiques in the late 80s into the 90s, the quality was better than it is now, and the depths of the competitors. During my reign, Kevin Levrone came second to me twice, Flex Wheeler came second to me once, Sean Ray came second to me once or twice, and NASA came second to me. So all those guys, any given day, you could change places. There was 5 or 6 guys there that were really, really great. And then after that, there was still some more guys that were really, really good. So I think the depth of the competition was greater. And of course, there was less options for people to do then in the 90s. I think bodybuilding was probably at its peak then in the 90s. You had no MMA or UFC, which is very popular, and you had no CrossFit. So maybe some of that would have gone into bodybuilding, that gene pool. I've decided to go somewhere else and do something else now rather than bodybuilding. So maybe that's got something to do with it. But even if you look at boxing, the 1970s, I remember when I was a kid, you had Ali, you had George Foreman, who else was there? Ken Norton, Joe Frazier. You haven't got that now. Why? I don't know. It's just, all those guys came along and they were great and they all came along at the same time. So there was so much depth there. So I've forgotten what your first question was now.
If you could turn back the clock, would you, if you could, to say, go back to, 2006, 10 years before, would you even just take the opportunity to take a year and just train and go back?
I don't think so. First of all, I couldn't because of the injuries I got, but let's assume that I didn't have those injuries. This is just me. This is the way I think. If you retire, you've retired for a reason. Yeah? And that reason is whatever your reason is. It hasn't gone away. And you need to be in a certain mental zone to compete in that level of bodybuilding, and probably any sport. You need to be in that zone. And once you've kind of left it and you've gone out of it and you're like enjoying your freedom and all, I think you can't go back to that zone. So I don't think so, you know. I did it to my maximum. I give it everything I got, and you know, that's all I wanted to do at that time. But then you get out of that zone and you want to do other things, and to just get back there, I don't think it's possible, really. And as you get older, your body changes, you know. Nobody can beat time. You know, as you get older, you tend to lose the sweep off your legs a little bit. You know, your shape change, you get a little bit of loose skin and so on. It's just like, you know, you have like Albert Beckles, who was like 60 years old competing in Mr. Olympia. You got Dexter in his late 40s. But they're the exception, not the rule, you know. So a lot of reasons why I wouldn't be interested in that. And at some point you've got to move on, you know. It's very tempting, I understand, for an athlete. As I spoke earlier, it's very difficult to get out, you know, when you retire and, you know, you're standing on stage and you've got thousands of people screaming and cheering. And I used to do guest posings around America, and the crowd would go crazy. You know, when I go back to my hotel afterwards, I couldn't even sleep because you're kind of so hyped up, you know. So there's probably that as well that people miss, and the adulation from the fans and all that kind of stuff, maybe. So there's a lot of reasons people might get drawn to go back in, but I don't like to see it. I like to remember guys when they're at the best. I don't, you know, they come back and they don't look as good. For me, it's a little bit sad, you know. All right, anyone? One more last question. We're running over time. Going to be a lady, sorry.
At what point did you realize you set a new precedent for bodybuilding?
I think when I went to guest pose in New York in 1993, and so I won the Olympia the year before, and actually in the off season I was about, I started my contest prep for 92 at about 270, as opposed to the previous year, which was, no, I started about 290 as opposed to the previous year when it was about 270, 275. So between 91 and 92 I made massive progress. But people didn't realize that because I over-dieted for the Mr. Olympia. So I came in very flat and very drawn. And it was kind of a strategic with that as well, because I knew Lee Haney was not competing. So my competition, at least I didn't know about Kevin Leverone coming. He was a surprise because he just won the Night of Champions. So I was thinking back to the previous who came behind me was Vince Taylor and Sean Ray and Labrada. So I thought, these guys are my competition. I'm much bigger than all those guys. So I'm going to get like super shredded like a lightweight, and I'll still be bigger than them. So I don't mind to sacrifice some size, but I overdid it. And the next year, as I said, I log everything, and I took a picture every week going through my preparations. And I went back and I looked, and I'm like, you know what, 6 weeks out, I was shredded. And then I kept coming down, and I got a bit tighter, but I got smaller as well, and I got flatter. So I'm not going to do that next year. So people didn't realize how much progress I made in 92. Everyone talks about these pictures in 93, right? But I got some from 92, which almost as good. But people didn't see it because of the contest. So it was 7 weeks before the Mr. Olympia. I did a guest posing in New York. And, I mean, New York crowds, they're loud, right? They're boisterous. And I walked out and all I heard was, huh? And silence. And then about halfway through my pose, and people like, yeah, you know. But at first it was kind of shock, you know. And everybody then was like, what the hell? We've never seen anything like this. So 93, and 93 when I did the Mr. Olympia in the compulsory round, they didn't call me out at all. It was like, okay, Dorian, stand over there. Right, let's get on with the judging, you know. And I remember one of the magazines asking me, how did you feel when they didn't call you out? I'm like, well, I knew I was either dead last place or was first place, and I know I wasn't last, so, you know, I didn't mind. Done all the work, you know. So yeah, 93 without a doubt, and a friend of mine, Steve Weinberger, gave me what was pretty good advice, but I'm not too good at listening. I'm a bit stubborn, you know. And what worked for me, and got me from this little hole-in-the-wall gym in England to beat the best in the world and the best that America had to offer, which was like, I mean, we used to look at American bodybuilders like they come from a different planet or something, you know. And I beat all these guys by just doing this heavy, intense training all the time. And my friend Steve said to me, man, you've got to stop this crazy fucking training heavy you're doing all the time. Now you've got the physique. Just maintain this physique, train lighter, and earn your money, man. You know? But that didn't excite me. I wanted to see how far I could push it, and I pushed it a little bit too much sometimes. Ended up getting injured. But yeah, 93, I think, you know, anyone that was at that contest that saw it, I don't know if you know, the DVDs or videotapes really do it justice. I think you have to be there. You know, everybody said, look, nobody's going to beat this guy now, as long as he doesn't get injured, you know? Guy with a magnificent beard.
Thanks, brother. Thank you. You spoke briefly about anabolics.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, after so many years of competing, how do you deal with weaning off the drugs? What was your experience?
Well,
were there any psychological side effects, hormonal imbalances?
Well, absolutely, yeah. I mean, as I said, I'm not very good at, you know, taking advice, and I tend to be a bit extreme in what I'm doing. Either I'm doing it properly, or I'm just not doing it. It's like that. So when I decided to retire, I did 97, and then I had the surgery, and then post-surgery I took a little bit of anabolics and growth hormone to help with my recovery and get back into training. And then I realized that I couldn't do it. You know, the strength imbalance was too much, and I couldn't train the way I wanted to train, and I had to be honest with myself. I'm not going to go to the Olympia, try to compete with, like, basically, you know, like going in a boxing match with one arm behind your back. You're not going to be able to do it with that level of competition if I couldn't train properly. And, you know, I couldn't even get back to where I was before, let alone any chance of improving on it. So I decided then, that's it, yeah? And I just stopped everything cold turkey, more or less. I didn't take HCG or nothing. And had some blood tests with an endocrinologist, actually. Well, don't forget, there's, you know, nobody was really used to dealing with athletes and anabolics, at least in the UK where I came from. They don't have much strength athletes and football players and power lifters and that kind of stuff, and definitely not doctors that are used to working with them. Like, it was refreshing to listen to the doctors last night when we had a little forum about anabolics, because now people can track you and give you feedback, and you know, they know what they're talking about and they have experience. So I just stopped, and I was discussing it with the endocrinologist, because with my who is now my ex-wife, we were trying to have a baby and looking at all the results and everything. So I said, what do you think I should do? You think I should do this, take HCG? And the guys just looked at me and he said, I think you probably know more than me about this. So I'm like, wow, this is great, you know? So I just stopped cold turkey. And, you know, I retired from competition. And everything was falling apart. Like, I realized I wasn't happy in my marriage. Like, everything seemed to be falling apart, and I felt, you know, I was actually clinically depressed. I went to the doctor, and you know, did all these tests and everything. He said, you're clinically depressed. And I'm sure that just stopping the anabolics like that had a big part to do with that, because you've got all these hormones in your body that make you feel, you know, you feel powerful, you feel assertive, and all of a sudden that's gone. And not only that, you've got like the normal testosterone level of a 12-year-old girl now, you know. So, yeah, you don't feel great. And after about 2.5, 3 years, my testosterone level was still under the minimum normal. So I decided then just to take testosterone replacement. I take 250 milligrams of enanthate twice a month, and that keeps me in the normal range. And I think that helped me feel a lot better. So it's essential that you get all these blood tests. Who's that big guy? You want to ask a question?
Hey, Dorian. Gosh, thanks for coming. What a great opportunity.
You want me to show you how to bench press or something?
Yeah, that wouldn't be bad. I got a 3-part question.
Wow.
First one, when you you changed the world of bodybuilding with your mass, and had such an unbelievable career, and were so impressive, and the things I saw you do were just over the top, unreal, and guys just like me, he's training his ass off, and you were so big. I'd like to know, first part of the question, what were some of the greatest times for you that you've experienced in your long and illustrious career? Secondly, now you've made a transition into the real world, and you've got a balanced life and a family, and you're still relevant, and you've made contributions before. You continue to do that with your supplement line and your appearances and seminars and all the rest. What's it like to have such a wonderful life as such a great champion and still be right on top, right with some of the guys in the competitions and all the rest?
I think...
But thirdly...
Getting old, Bill. My memory's not that good.
Okay, we'll go one at a time, surely.
Okay, the best times... I mean, there's so many good times. But I got to say I was a little intense, probably like yourself, so I didn't let myself enjoy them as much as I could have done, They tell you, like, smell the flowers on the way and stuff. Probably could have done a bit more than that, but, I didn't do too bad doing it my way, so... there's a lot of good times and a lot of people I met, that's the thing. I remember when I was a kid, I always had this dream of, like, I didn't want to be like the people around me. I couldn't be like them. I had this thing inside me. It just made me want to do something else. And I wanted to travel. I wanted to experience different countries and different cultures and, trying to get as much experience into this life as I could. And that's one of the things that I got through bodybuilding that, money can't buy, is those experiences around the world. And when you go, I've been to Japan, South America, Australia, New Zealand, all over Europe, all over the States. Most places, a few places I like to go, but most places I've been. But I didn't go as a tourist. I went as Dorian Yates, and people were there to receive me and take you into their homes. And, so you're with somebody from that country that's in that culture, and they can show you around. And it's different from just going there yourself as a tourist and you don't know anybody. So, I could call somebody up in Australia and say, hey, I'm coming. Oh, yeah, come down and stay in my, like that. Or Japan. Or these things you can't buy. So those are the experiences. And I just enjoyed, like, seeing how far could I push. How far could I push my body? How big can I get? How strong can I get? How ripped can I get? All those things was a challenge. And I was very conscious at the time, which I'm glad, was like, I'm only going to do this once. I don't want to be, when I'm older, looking back saying, what if I could have done this, I could have done that. At least I know I gave it 110%, probably too much sometimes, but I'd rather say that and end up with a few injuries than like, shit, I could have done better, I could have pushed. And I look back and generally there's nothing more I could have done. I gave 100%. And what was the last question, Bill?
Second was, you have such a balanced life now, and you have so many other interests, and you're doing so many things. Can you just speak to that a bit? That you're such a great champion. Most champions are just like gone, or they die, or something. But you've got a life.
Yeah,
Tell
I'm
us
still
about
alive.
that.
I'm still here. It took time, It took time. The Mr. Olympia, I train hard, and this time in the morning, and I eat these meals, and it took me years to get out of that. I don't think you were here earlier on, but it took me years to stop being in a restaurant, right? And when they brought my food out in front of me, this calculation going on in my head, mental arithmetic. How much protein is there? 50 grams of protein there. There's 800 calories. There's 150 grams of carbs. There's so much fat. Like, this wouldn't stop, because I've been doing it for so long. So it took time. And it's only really recently that I started doing other things, like dropped a bit of weight, doing some swimming, doing some hiking, doing some yoga, riding my bike. I did a time before my shoulder injury got worse, and probably this is why it got worse. I was doing some grappling, some jiu-jitsu. I was doing training with the fighters, doing the circuit, doing the cardio, and they were killing me because they were all like 150 pounds, and I was still like 270 and stuff. But I was trying to keep up, and I enjoyed all that. It's different challenges, So that's what I'm doing now. I love to go out in the mountains, go for a hike, walking, swimming, anything. I just like activity. I like to train. So it took time to do that. And I speak now, and I speak about a lot of things. I've got this thing I'm doing, London Real, where, I talked about my experience in there with psychedelics, talk about my views on spirituality and God and life and whatever that is, and all these things. And fortunately, people are very interested in what I've got to say, and they like what I've got to say. And I think it's because I've always been straight, no bullshit. I just say how it is, and I think people pick up on that. There's not an agenda, or anything like that. I don't really care what other people think. And as I get older, I think I've learned that is freedom. You're really free when you don't give a fuck,
I knew I liked you for a reason, Dorian. But are you shutting things down? Are we done with question and answer? Because there's only...
You're Bill Kazmaier, man. You're Bill Kazmaier. You can do what you want.
When's the book coming, and what are going to be some of the highlights?
Oh, the book, man. I finished writing my book. Well, I didn't write it, kind of like with a ghostwriter. We worked together. And I'm pretty laid back, and I've got other things going on. He's pretty laid back, and he's got other things going on. So we've been doing this since, I think, 2011, 2012. Bit now. And then, of course, you keep going over it, and there's more I can tell, there's more. But there's always more. At some point, you've got to put it to bed, right? So we put it to bed now. It's just being edited. Then I start putting the pictures in. And it's all the way from my childhood and, the things I went through as a kid, which probably shaped me to a degree. When I was a teenager and I was a skinhead and I was in a gang and I went to jail, all this stuff. And then, you got the bodybuilding phase and the story, and then, the big crash when I finished bodybuilding, the depression, trying to find a way in the world and, who you are now without this thing that you're doing. All that, and then, getting to where I am now, which is, I think, I'm probably the happiest and most balanced I've ever been in my life. And I look back at my pictures when I was Mr. Olympia, and I remember Joe Weider coming to my photo shoots, and he's like, "Smile, Dorian, smile." I'm like, I can't smile, man. I couldn't smile for the camera. I was just too intense, and I couldn't, put on the cheesy smile. I was like, that's bullshit. I can't do that, In the end, he's like, "Oh, Dorian, go on, do what you want," I look back, and I'm like, I'm never smiling in these pictures because I was so into what I was, so intense, but I don't think I had no real, joy, I feel happier now than when I was doing that, although, that has made my life, doing that. I wouldn't be here talking to you, you wouldn't be listening to me if I hadn't done that. So I see it now as a platform that I had, and now people listen to me because I won Mr. Olympia and stuff. So I enjoy talking to people about different things now. And what's very refreshing, on Facebook, they've got demographics. So on one of my Facebook pages, we've got 3.5 million likes or followers. I don't know what it is, but anyway, a lot of people on there. And it gives you a breakdown of who these people are, the demographics, where they're from, and what age group and everything like that. And I was very pleasantly surprised that the most popular age group on my social media is 18 to 24. And these guys were not even born when I was competing. So, it's nice to be relevant still to the new generation that's coming up, and they respect what I did and they listen to what I got to say. And the countries as well, Iran, India, Egypt, USA, of course, but I thought USA would be way and far above anyone else, but it wasn't. So people all over the world know who I am. I remember going to Russia a couple of years ago, and whenever I go somewhere, I love to, I love history, so I like to see, the historic monuments and buildings and places. And we were in Russia, and we were at the place where the Tsar and the royal family got executed, and now they built a church on the site. So I went there and I was taking pictures, and there was a wedding there, and there was a few hundred people at this wedding, and a couple of guys were like, "Oh," in Russian, "Fuck the wedding, man." They all came over. They're taking pictures of me, and I'm like, they weren't obviously bodybuilders or anything. I was like, how do these guys know who I am? I met guys from the forest in Siberia that, that's how far Joe Weider's magazines, went in the 90s. They went all over the world. And, you know, Russia was just opening up in the 90s after the fall of communism. And these magazines were like gold for the guys. So all around the world. Ken is saying, cut it.
There's only one more question. I mean, you know, you're considered a god in the physical culture anywhere you go. When you recognize it must be really incredible, because I kind of sometimes feel the same thing when I'm traveling around. But, I mean, you were so big and fantastic, but when you're going in the airport tomorrow and you have anonymity, no one knows you, and you're that tourist, describe that feeling, because it's pretty incredible when you're a celebrity like you are.
Well, I think I got a nice bit of celebrity, where I'm known, you know, not in a huge, you know, I'm not a movie star or anything like that, where, you know, you can't walk down the street or you can't go somewhere and you don't have privacy. I can do that, and the way I carry myself is like I almost forget about all this. I'm just me, I'm just Dorian, I'm doing my thing. And sometimes I see people looking at me and I'm thinking to myself, why are they looking at me? Oh, yeah, you know? And I like to be like that. I never sought the limelight. I got it as a consequence of what I was doing, and it's nice. But I don't need it. I never sought it out. And anyone that knows me, like my close friends, we go places and like, I don't tell people who I am when I talk to them. Oh, you go to the gym? I'm like, yeah. That's, you know, I just leave it at that. I don't like the whole thing and, yeah, look at me on Google and, you know, all this stuff. So I like that when I'm just anonymous. And sometimes, you know, I get a bit taken aback when someone comes up to me. Oh, yeah. I'll take a picture. All right, I get it. Yeah, so it's a nice balance, you know. I've got people all around the world that know me and respect me for what I did. And that's the thing. It's not like empty, like celebrity, you didn't do shit, you know, like a lot of people nowadays. They go on some show or something and they get famous for doing nothing. People respect what I did. So, you know, I'll accept that. That's great. All right, thank you.
On behalf of all the delegates and Swiss, I'd like to give you this.
This is almost as honored as the Sandow Trophy. The Swiss
Thank you for coming, Dorian.
Thanks, man.
Amazing.